Director of Government and Community Relations and Chamber Board member. Thank you for your loyalty and your support for our monthly corporate programs. I also want to express a special thank you to our 2021 Breakfast Series sponsors. We appreciate your support. Mark will speak for about 25 minutes, and during that time, we encourage you to post any questions you may have in the chat box. These will then be shared with Mark following his presentation by our program host, Bill Bone. We ask that you remain muted and off camera for the duration of the program so that we can keep the focus on our guest speaker. And now, I would like to introduce our 2022 chair-elect, Bill Bone, today's program host. Bill.
Thank you, Donald Burgess. You know, our chamber is 108 years old this year, so we've been around a long time. But today is Donald's first all-member meeting in his capacity as CEO. On behalf of the chairman, Rick Rakenis, and the board, thank you, Donald, for assuming this responsibility. Of course, Donald has been with the chamber for over 12 years, but it's nice to see you in this role, Mr. President. You know, the chamber has hosted all-member breakfast meetings with distinguished speakers since 1990. That's over 30 years. For several years now, our April breakfast meeting has featured today's speaker. Last year in 2020, in April, we were just getting into the COVID pandemic, and so we missed his presentation, but we're grateful he's back, even though this is a virtual meeting. I think it's interesting to note that the last breakfast we shared together at the convention center before COVID was Kelly Smallridge, the CEO of the Business Development Board. She's our usual February speaker, and that was February of 2020. You know, COVID has made live breakfast meetings impossible for longer than we expected, but I'm pleased to let our speaker know that we've enjoyed very good participation from our members this past year using this virtual format, and today is no different. You know, the members that are attending have been taken off the camera to reduce the distraction, but if you could scroll through your screen, you would see there are over 200 registered participants today, including elected leaders like West Palm Beach Mayor Keith James and City Commissioners Joe Peduzzi, Christina Lambert, Kelly Shove, Corey Nearing, and Christy Fox, as well as our County Mayor Dave Kerner and Commissioners Greg Weiss and Matt Bernard. But now I have an important announcement. For the record, we believe that the prevalence of vaccinations and the status of the pandemic will make today our last virtual all-member meeting. Our next meeting returns to a live and in-person breakfast format, and it is our annual awards breakfast scheduled for Thursday, May 27th at the Convention Center. I hope you will all register to attend by logging into the Chamber's website. Now, before that breakfast meeting and coming up in just 10 days is another Chamber event, and that's on Saturday, May 8th. It's the 10th annual Women for Women 5K race in Okeechobee Park. That's Saturday, May 8th, the day before Mother's Day. Jupiter Medical Center is the premier sponsor of the race again this year, and we expect over 400 runners, mostly ladies, ages 4 to 84 plus, but men are allowed to participate, and I'm going to be out there. I think Dennis Grady will be out there. This year's theme is Women Are Superheroes. And Iva Grady, the race director, and that she is a true superhero, she plans a lot of special amenities to honor and celebrate the racers. Registration is still open, but please note, there is no same-day race registration or same-day packet pickup this year. So if you're interested in this event, just Google Women for Women 5K and register to run. Or if you want to support the race but don't want to run with the group, you can register to participate virtually. Jupiter Medical Center is the primary sponsor, but please acknowledge the other chamber sponsors who supported this race with the financial contribution. In addition to raising money for the chamber's programs, the sponsors paid the entry fee for over 100 at-risk girls from ages 6 to 12 to run the race with adult mentors. The chamber sponsors are Rick McKennis and the Trujillo Bay Chocolate Company, Don Kozlowski and F. Florida Power and Light, Peter Cruz and the FAU Ethics Academy, Michelle McGovern and Baptist Hospital, Lamoya and Bone, St. Mary's and the Palm Beach Children's Hospital, South Florida Fair, Palm Beach Kennel Club, South Florida Science Center and Aquarium, and Evelyn and Christopher Hopkins. Now, let me tell you something about our speaker. He is Mark Wilson, President and CEO of the Florida Chamber. You know, it would be impossible for me to overstate how important the Florida Chamber is for business and for our local chamber. It is Florida's largest, most influential business advocacy organization, and Mark Wilson is our chief lobbyist. He is actively involved in the current legislative session and will be giving us an update almost in real time as things are actually happening even as we speak. Under Mark's leadership, the Florida Chamber has created multiple different ways of focusing the business community into action with organizations like the Florida Business Agenda and the Florida Chamber Grassroots Network. But you know, Mark's main mission is to constantly improve Florida's business climate. So whether you're a native like me or you just arrived in the state, you can feel good about Mark's leadership and what he is doing to create and support legislative priorities that generate prosperity, like high-paying jobs, vibrant communities, and making sure that Florida is not only competitive with other states, but also competitive on a global scale. The Chamber board members and trustees are familiar with Dr. Parrish. He's the Florida Chamber's chief economist. He attends our monthly meetings. We thank Mark Wilson for letting him do that. He gives us a snapshot of the state's economy, but today, the entire chamber gets to hear from his boss, Mark Wilson, who will deliver what I call his annual State of the State address, featuring a 2021 legislative update and the latest information on Florida's economy. Mark, welcome to our meeting. We are eager to hear what you have to say, sir.
All right. Well, Bill, thank you very, very much for that introduction. Give me just a moment here to get the technology where we need it, and then we'll officially start. So, how's that? Can you see that, Bill?
Yes. Good.
All right. All right. Well, first of all, congratulations to all of you. The decision to make today your last virtual membership meeting is a real big sign of things to come. And Bill, I will just tell you right at the outset, what you and Donald are doing there right now in terms of moving back to in-person. Most states are not able to do this right now. I happen to be our national chair of our National Association of State Chambers, and there are still dozens of states that, you know, are thinking it's going to be the fall or January before they even start thinking about doing this. And so Florida's doing a lot of things right. We need to get better at some things, but if chambers of commerce work together, there's literally nothing that we can't do. So, Donald, thank you very much for the invitation, and congratulations on your new role. I would be remiss if I didn't tell everybody, you know, Dennis Grady has really helped the Chamber of Commerce movement throughout America and especially throughout Florida. And I know that all of us are looking to build on what he did over the last couple of decades. If you know, in the Chamber of Commerce Hall of Fame, you know, there will be a place there for Dennis. And Donald, I'm sure you're going to follow in his footsteps in a couple of years as well. But with that said, Bill, what an introduction. You should teach this stuff. You've got this down to a science. And so I appreciate your leadership. And again, it's been really good to get to know you as we've prepared for today. And I look forward to working more closely with you in the coming months. So let me tell you what we're going to do. Bill gave you an outline. We are on day 59 of a planned 60-day legislative session. If all goes well, the Florida legislative session should end tomorrow afternoon, mid-afternoon. It doesn't have to, but it could. And it certainly looks like if today goes well and tomorrow morning goes well, it looks like session could in fact end on time, which would be tomorrow afternoon at some point. Let me just say this. I have a lot to share today. I'm going to go very fast. As Bill and Donald said, we're really looking forward to the question and answer period. So use the chat feature for that. We're not going to stop as we go. I'm going to try to, like I say, go real fast. I do want to warn everyone, every slide I have to share could be its own seminar. And so if you have questions that are beyond today, I'm happy to share this presentation with anyone who wants it. And I'm also happy to have follow-up conversations to hear your thoughts on how we can continue to keep the momentum going in Florida. I'll probably say some things that today that 95% of us agree with and maybe 5% don't. Please understand, the headline on my presentation would be, if Florida was a stock, I'd be buying all of it that I could afford. Our fundamentals are some of the best in the country. I know many of us watched the State of the Union last night, and Bill, I appreciate the State of the State reference. We're going to use that, I think. But there were some big announcements that were made last night, including free college tuition for everyone in America. Things like that, if enacted, would fundamentally change, some of what I'm talking about today. Those are a long ways from being enacted, but please understand, not even I have a crystal ball. And so there's a lot of big aspirations at the federal level right now. Florida's success over the last decade has largely been because we've decided to take our success into our own hands and try to grow our own economy in Florida, despite whatever Washington's doing, good, bad, or indifferent. So as we get started, would want everybody to know, I wish, desperately we could be there in person, and I'm looking forward to a future invitation to come back and do that. This is very much a nonpartisan, pro-business presentation. So happy to answer questions when we get through it. All right, so you'll see here, uniting business for good. Our fundamental belief at the Florida Chamber of Commerce is that in working with over 100 local chambers of commerce and in working with chamber members, we believe that good things can happen, whether it's our environment, whether it's ending childhood poverty, whether it's diversifying our economy, or simply growing our GDP. Good things happen when businesses that care put their dollars and their muscle and their brains together through chambers of commerce and try to make sure that the right things happen. So that is essentially what we're working on, and that's what you're going to hear from me today. So with that said, very big backdrop here. Most of you know that the business community in Florida is working off of a common framework. It's called the Florida 2030 Blueprint. And the basic tenets of it that set up our legislative conversation are that we believe Florida over the next decade can grow from, right now, we're the 17th largest economy on the planet. We're bigger than Saudi Arabia. If we all band together and do the right things, we can become the 10th largest economy in just a decade. So we'd be bigger than Mexico's economy. And it's vital that everyone on this call continues to support your local chamber of commerce, and find ways to even better unify the local business community around growing the private sector. It's vital. 39 action steps we have to take, but look at some of these numbers. We expect Florida to grow by 4 million more residents in 10 years. And that means we have to create about 2 million new jobs. Now, if you were paying close attention, the last time I presented to this group, it was about 1.5 million new jobs by 2030. But we've lost about 500,000 jobs due to COVID. And so you have to add the jobs lost to the jobs that we needed, and we're back to about 2 million, and we're going to get there. Also keep in mind the 50 million and the 3 million number, just for context. On a pre-COVID basis, we're going to add about 50 million annual visitors to Florida by 2030. That's on top of the pre-COVID 130 million number. On top of that, we'll have 3 million more drivers on our roads by 2030. So, I'm hoping that all couple hundred people who are listening right now are thinking, wait a minute, how are we going to handle 50 million more people visiting Florida, and how are we going to handle 3 million more people on our roads? Well, that's why water quality matters so much. That's why investing in infrastructure matters so much. And that's why chambers of commerce are trying to get out ahead of all of this. It's sometimes unpopular to put the long term ahead of the short term, but it's exactly what we need to do in Florida. So I mentioned, kind of where we are and where we're growing to. Today is day 423 since Florida's first confirmed case of COVID. And if you look at the Florida scorecard numbers here, you'll see we're adding about 900 people a day. And you can tell, kind of where we are there. We added 1 out of every 11 new U.S. jobs over the last 5 years. So Florida's a big deal. And as everyone probably noticed, the census numbers are in, and Florida grew quite a bit, but we're going to add 1 member of our congressional delegation. Many of us thought it would be 2. But when the numbers came in, it was decided that we're going to add 1 more there. Notice on the top right here, I have it circled 475,000. For context on today's presentation, Florida right now has 402,000 open jobs that cannot find talented people to fill them. The number 1 complaint we're getting right now all across Florida from especially small and mid-sized businesses is you've got all these open jobs, but your people are reporting to you that they're making more money staying home, not working. That's not going to be a permanent situation, but notice we have 475,000 people looking for jobs right now that can't find them. So we clearly have a skills mismatch, which is why we're so focused on workforce education, and why I know in Palm Beach County, you mentioned Kelly Smallridge earlier, Bill. I know that Kelly and your workforce systems and your chambers of commerce are working closely together to try to make sure that the workforce readiness platforms that you have are going to meet the needs of future employers in Palm Beach County. That is a secret for success, and you all are on top of that, and I appreciate that. Here is a little bit of a local look. If you look at the Florida scorecard and you go to Palm Beach County, notice you have about 35,000 people in the county that are currently unemployed. These are people who are actively looking for work, if you will. But notice you have about 19,000 fewer jobs today in Palm Beach County than you had a year ago. So if I'm the county commission for Palm Beach, this is the number 1 thing I'm talking about at every single meeting for the next 10 years, right? Of how do we grow private sector jobs in Palm Beach County? If we could get county commissions and chambers of commerce and economic development groups all trying to answer that 1 question in 67 counties, it would be amazing how much we would all be on the same page. And I want to congratulate those of you who are trying to make that happen. But check this out. You've got about 1.5 million people. You're going to add 100 to 300,000 more residents in the next 10 years. So you better work together and you better get that right. You need to add 108,000 new jobs in your county over the next decade. So that ought to be the rally cry of everybody who's trying to do economic development work. Okay, I'm going to go fast through several slides, and then I'm going to do what Bill asked me to do, and Donald, which is to cover what's happening in the legislative session. Remember back over 100 years ago, the world had the Spanish flu. This was a Georgia Tech football game. Everybody was wearing masks. I showed this photo a year ago, and everyone thought we were crazy, that this is never what would happen in the U.S. We've lost just under 600,000 people in the U.S., about 575,000 to COVID. The Spanish flu took over 650,000. So COVID certainly rivaling that. And a year ago, everybody thought we were crazy for making that prediction, but it's turning out, unfortunately, to be true. Remember I said if Florida was a country, we'd be the 17th largest economy in the world. Here's a global look from Johns Hopkins. We have about 150 million cases around the world. Obviously, the U.S. is leading, but India is going to try to catch up to us, it looks like. I want you to take a look at Brazil there with over 14 million cases. People ask me when Florida's travel, tourism, when is our international economy going to come back? We typically get millions of Brazilians coming to Florida every year. And until they get their situation under control, they're not going to be coming into the U.S. And so we're doing a lot right in Florida, but remember, we're in a global economy where we have 192 countries and territories who are caught up in this. So we're not in this alone. So no matter how well of a job we're doing, we're not in it alone. And then finally, I just wanted to remind everybody that, Florida on a national scale is being heralded by many as, the state that got it right in terms of balancing staying open, but also protecting our most vulnerable, especially our seniors. But what I wanted to show you here is we do regular polling, and some of you think that Florida got it right, and some of you think Florida didn't get it right. But notice this, Republicans think that Florida did it, 68% of Republicans think that Florida did it right. 68% of Democrats think that we didn't do it right. And so that's something that we all have to figure out how to all come back together again, whether you like it or whether you don't. You know, Florida is reopening its economy again, and we're all going to have to be on the same page. So I want to encourage us to get past our feelings about what happened or what is happening, and really figure out a way to focus on those job numbers and that economic development goal that we have. Speaking of the job numbers, I mentioned that we were down just under 500,000 jobs year over year in Florida. Common question that we're asked is, well, in what industries? So, you know, notice this, about half of all the jobs that we've lost have been in the leisure and hospitality industry. And you can see on the right side, you can see 19% of the jobs lost have come from that industry alone. Next slide here, I want to get a little bit more granular for you. These are statewide numbers, obviously, but you know, you can look and see manufacturing's almost back, information services is almost back, professional services is almost back. Obviously, this leisure and hospitality is really way off. It will likely be the summer of 2023 before that industry is back to pre-COVID levels. And so I know nobody likes to hear that, but that's what the economists are telling us. And so anything we can do to accelerate that's going to be important. Here's just another way of looking at this. You know, Florida lost well over 1 million jobs, and we lost it overnight back in, say, April, May of last year. And you can see where we are and where our trajectory's been over the last decade. So that's really there for you to look at later. And here's a look since we lost over 1 million jobs in 1 month last year in April. This is just a monthly look at those jobs. Again, this is something you can look up later, but I thought it was important for context. Most other states do not have this kind of a graph. Florida, again, is building momentum, and I think that's an important place to be. A couple slides here that you can look up later, but I wanted to give context of how Palm Beach County is doing compared to the rest of the state. So you're obviously in a very, very important part of Florida's economy, Southeast Florida. And if you put the three counties together, you can see we've had, in terms of numbers, we've had big job losses there, you know, 177,000 fewer jobs today than we had a year ago. And that's contributing to Florida's 445,000. Now, I have no doubt that Palm Beach County is not only going to come back fast, but I think you're going to come back better than before because you've learned a lot, and there's a real focus right now on how to grow the economy. Here you have, again, just if you want to look at your county instead of the region, you can see you're down just over 18,000. I mentioned that earlier. Here is a big problem, folks, a big conundrum that America has right now, and Florida is certainly in the epicenter of this. Remember I said we had over 400,000 jobs open right now that can't find people, and we have 475,000 people looking for jobs? Well, unfortunately, we have 460,000 Floridians who stopped looking for work. For whatever reason, they're no longer in the workforce, no longer actively looking to work. We know statistically that most of these workers are moms or females who are staying home to take care of kids and parents. That is something that we're working on across the country right now. And smart employers are going to figure out ways to accommodate and ways to work with people who are very talented and want to work, but for reasons that we're all aware of, they can't. But 460,000 people leaving the workforce is a gigantic number. And the $64,000 question is, will they come back into the workforce when kids go back to school again, when situation normalizes? That's something we've got to keep an eye on. Here's some numbers you probably haven't seen before, and you're certainly not hearing this in many circles around America. So if you think about it this way, if there's 3 types of jobs, if there's high wage, which is over 60,000, there's median, which is 27 to 60, and then there's low wage. During COVID, Florida, if you're a high wage earner over 60,000, we've actually added jobs in that category. Florida has added jobs in the middle income category. We've lost the most jobs is in that lower income under 27,000 category. Now, I put that up there because I want you to see how we compare to the national average. We're way better than the national average in all three categories. And so when you hear me saying that Florida mostly got it right, we're backing that up with the numbers. These are real numbers. I can have our economists talk to you if you want to know more details on these numbers. Also, I mentioned that the census came out, and the storyline here is Florida for 100 years has grown faster than the nation as a whole, and we certainly did it when the last census numbers came out. You can see that on the right side, 14.6% growth. Here's just another way of looking, another way of graphing the same data. I'm about to get into some legislative items, which I know is why we're all on the line right now, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to raise awareness. I mentioned if we're going to become the 10th largest economy in the world, there are 39 things we need to do. One of the 39 is we need 100% of Palm Beach's third graders reading at or above third grade reading level by 2030. And right now, you only 54%, you're 4% behind the state average, but 54% of your third graders are reading at or above grade level. And what that means is you've got almost 7,000 third graders right now in Palm Beach that are not reading at grade level. And folks, these are pre-COVID numbers. And so sad to say the numbers are probably temporarily going to get worse all throughout the nation. But nonetheless, these are the numbers we have. If you go to the FloridaGapMap.org on your own time, all those dots on the map represent your schools that report third grade reading scores. You can actually mouse over those schools and you can see the percentage of the kids in third grade that can read at grade level. And you can actually see exactly how many kids in each school in Palm Beach County are not reading at grade level. And then your business can maybe volunteer extra hours and help those teachers, help those principals. What we need is, for example, the United Way's Reading Pals program is a great option of what can businesses do to help kindergarten, first, second, third, pre-kindergarten, and so forth. Big issue. We're dealing with this all over Florida, and we're asking for your help. And then finally, when we talk about childhood poverty, here we have in Palm Beach, we have over 50,000 kids living in poverty. These are under 18. So right now, about 18% of your kids are living in poverty. Our statewide goal, we want to cut the number in half. And so we need to get Palm Beach under 10%. I can't thank Carlos and Wayne Huizinga for what they've done in their zip code. They're a national best practice with North End Rise. As a matter of fact, we'll be highlighting them at our annual Prosperity Summit coming up next month. So now real quick, I want to go through the legislative items. So I wanted to give backdrop to what's going on in the Florida economy and what's going on in our education system, what's going on in our economic development ecosystem so that the legislative priorities make sense. First of all, your chamber helps us put our legislative agenda together every year. It's called the Florida Business Agenda. We take it to the Florida legislature. You can see there the Florida Senate President and the Speaker of the House. We work very closely with both of them and are aligned on many issues, not all, but are aligned on many issues. If I only had one slide to show you, I would say this was generally what was on the Florida Chamber's wish list in terms of our jobs and competitiveness agenda going into the legislative session. And I want to spend a second here on what we're looking at because it'll make the presentation go a little faster. So COVID liability protections. What we were looking at here is there was a fear across the country that even when businesses follow all of the CDC, OSHA, EPA guidelines, you still might find someone in a frivolous lawsuit situation where your business gets sued simply because somebody got sick, even if they didn't get sick at work. How can we protect small, mid-sized businesses from this? And so some states started passing common sense COVID liability protections. And really want to thank the legislature and Governor DeSantis. This was the first bill to pass this year, the first bill to get signed. And now, as long as businesses did it right, as long as you took care of your employees, your vendors, your customers, your visitors, then you're going to be fine. And we were looking for that common sense way of approaching this, and I think we found it. The next couple of items, if you think about when you buy something online from an out-of-state vendor, you're supposed to pay sales tax on it, but the vendor was not required to collect it. Florida was one of only 2 states in the country that has a sales tax and was not collecting this. It was Missouri and Florida. Proud to say your chamber was a big help in getting this done. This bill passed. It should bring in over $700 million of additional revenue to the state. And what we were able to do in really a trifecta is all of you were going to have unemployment insurance tax increases because of COVID. Through no fault of your own, you were all going to have unemployment insurance increases. Also, Florida is the only state in America to charge sales tax on the rent that your business pays. So if you rent or lease your space, you get the privilege of paying a sales tax on top of that. So what the legislature is going to do is we're going to start collecting that remote sales tax, which you were supposed to pay all along. And the legislature is going to use those collections to buy down your unemployment insurance tax rates increases. And after that's taken care of, they're then going to use those dollars to start buying down the business rent tax. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to continue to make Florida even more affordable and more competitive so that all of you can create more jobs and reinvest those dollars back into your business, back into more jobs, into technology and so forth. We had hoped the legislature would do a little bit more on legal reform. A little bit of that got done, but we'll have to come back next year for more there. And then, of course, the biggest issue of all is workforce, aligning future workforce with future economic development. Major legislative changes took place this year in early learning. There's an early learning quality bill that passed. Also, there's a workforce reorganization bill that passed. There's quite a bit that happened there. On the school choice front, 61,000 families are going to be added into an already robust school choice movement. So whether you like that stuff or not, the legislature did it. And also, we wanted to make sure that economic development was fully funded and that our tourism promotion efforts, our Visit Florida efforts were fully funded. Visit Florida ended up not only being fully funded, but they received an additional $25 million. Enterprise Florida was almost fully funded. However, no marketing dollars were available or were allocated this year. So that's a challenge. That's a bit of a disappointment. But they did come up with $50 million for the job grant program, and that will be helpful. That's not something that was in place last year. And then if you look there, long-term infrastructure investments, I talked to you about our population growth, our tourism growth, the need to invest in our ports and our airports and our seaports and broadband technology, and especially in water. Huge win for Palm Beach County. The legislature put $500 million into septic to sewer conversions and another $50 million into cleaning up water north of the lake before it even gets into Okeechobee. And so I don't know if everybody's talking about that in your backyard, but everybody's talking about it up here. It's a humongous win to protect the environment like that and to protect South Florida. And we're glad that they did that. A little bit of, kind of what's going on here. If we were going to give a national business person of the year in Florida, it would have to go to this guy, Cuomo in New York. He's sent us more business because of his actions than almost anybody else. But if we were actually going to have a real business person of the year, it would have to go to this guy. And I think, all you have to do is turn on any national program right now. And people are beginning to see what I told all of you a year ago. And that is that when the history books are written, I really do believe that Florida internationally, not just in the US, is going to be known as the state that found a way to balance keeping business open, but also keeping our people safe. And if you look at almost any number that you want to come up with, the numbers vet themselves out. Happy to talk offline with anybody who wants to talk about this. In terms of legislative issues, this is what it looked like at the Capitol this year. It was closed to the public by and large. Normally, we have thousands and thousands of people lobbying and coming up here, but this is what it looked like this year. Almost everything was virtual. You could come in on an invitation only basis, but advocacy was very different this year. In terms of sort of by the numbers, don't worry about looking at everything on here, but Florida had a record budget. It's a $101 billion state budget. It's the first time we've ever had a $100 billion budget. Keep in mind, Florida's population is less than New York, but New York's budget is twice that of Florida, which is why Palm Beach has so many new residents coming from the Northeast right now. Congratulations for that. Also, if you look down here, you'll see that the legislature filed about 3,000 bills. They've passed about 200. The governor has signed 6 so far. And so expect, another almost 200 bills to make it to the governor's desk in the next 2 weeks. This is pretty common for everything to happen at the very last minute. It's sort of like the last 2 minutes of a basketball game, if you will. A lot of concern at the beginning of the year about budgets and cuts and gaps. We started with almost over a $2 billion budget gap. The legislature closed that because all of you kept the economy going. And so the actuals are actually much higher than every estimate that we've had so far. So the legislature had more dollars to work with than they expected. In fact, an extra $10 billion from the federal government. And about half of that was deployed. You can look later at where the legislature put that 10 billion. I wanted to add this slide in here for those of you who might want to see what did the House do, what did the Senate do, and what are they doing with that 10 billion. As we kind of round this out here, I again want to thank your chamber. This online sales tax collection, the remote sales tax collection, was a gigantic win for small businesses because we all know people were going into small businesses and trying on clothes or looking at a tool or a chainsaw. And then they were going home and buying it online from an out-of-state vendor under the incorrect assumption that they didn't have to pay the sales tax. So we were creating small business showrooms, but people were making purchases out of state, and everyone loses when that happened. And so we put a massive coalition together. Your chamber was part of it. We were able to get this passed. Humongous win. Good. It's a great year for small businesses. And here on the COVID liability piece, your chamber played a big role here. You can see this. We had one of the largest coalitions we've ever put together of local chambers this year. And that was a big reason that this was the first bill to pass. People are still asking me, well, what else is out there? And Bill, I'm going to turn it back over to you here in just a second. We put this slide together a month ago as a prediction of what the end of session could look like. There's still an elections bill sitting out there. There's still a vaccine passport bill sitting out there. There's a lot of talk about what are we going to do about the unemployment extension in terms of requiring you to look for work. That was just extended, but there's a lot of talk about what's going to happen with that. A month ago, there was a lot of talk about a gambling compact that was put together. I'll tell you about that in a second. And there was an anti-riot bill that actually was signed into law a week ago. As I end here, and Bill, turn it back to you in a second, one of my favorite bills of the year that did not pass was a bill that would have required every new resident when they apply for a driver's license to get this message. And it's essentially a fun and accurate message about, look, we're glad you moved here from somewhere else. Florida's a great place to learn, work, retire, or just make a change. But as you get here, we hope you learn a lot about Florida. We hope you help us keep Florida, Florida. So I think we have an education to do on people who are moving here from other places. They're moving here because of how special Florida is. But free enterprise isn't free, and we're all going to have to work together to make sure that we keep the momentum going here in Florida. I mentioned the gaming compact. The legislature has already announced they've got a deal together on the gambling compact, but they're going to have to come back in May for a special session to essentially ratify it. So stay tuned for that. Also, you're not the only chamber going back to in-person meetings. The Florida Chamber's moving back to in-person meetings in May. We have our annual safety conference coming up at Disney in about 10 days. And then we have our Poverty and Prosperity Summit at the end of May. I hope many of you are going to make the trip over to Sarasota for that. We were actually in your community year before last. And then, of course, our annual Workforce Summit will be up in Orlando in June. So Bill, I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of what we know. Obviously, 2022 is an election year, so as soon as this session is finished and the governor does all of his vetoes and his signings, the whole country is going to be focusing on Florida in 2022. So let's enjoy the fact that we can talk about legislative issues now while we still can. So really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope we have a little bit of time for some questions.
We do, Mark, and thank you. I tell you that presentation was very comprehensive. It's been what we've come to expect. You give us a history of the state, or a state of the state, that really no one else can appreciate, I think, except for you in your unique position. We do have questions. There's questions about jobs, there's questions about tax, the environment, but the first one that I want to relay to you is a question about education. I mean, we've talked about, you talked about it, third grade reading is important. Education is so important, both in the way, the people who come to the state think about it, unless of course they don't want to think about it because they don't have any kids in school. But how would you say, I just want your impression here, how would you say this governor and this legislature is different than past legislatures and past governors when it comes to education? You talked about school choice. You mentioned that we all want to do third grade reading increases, but then we've got this new the school choice situation. How would you say we are different today, or is it the same old thing?
Yeah, Bill, that's a really great question. And I think there's a humongous Grand Canyon difference between this governor and this legislature and what the prior governor and prior legislatures were focused on. So if you go back and you think about Governor Scott for a minute, right? From the minute he started running for election, it was jobs, jobs, jobs. You could ask Rick Scott, what color the sky was, and the answer was jobs, jobs, jobs. And so the legislature was very focused on, how do we bring back all of the lost jobs that we had? And Bill, also from an economic development standpoint, how do we help Kelly Smallridge and how do we help 67 economic development groups diversify Florida's economy and not only bring jobs back, but high wage, high skill jobs? And so I think if you had to put a book together of the Rick Scott led era, it was all about jobs, jobs, jobs. And thank goodness for that. When Ron DeSantis started running for office and after he won, it became very clear that it was a given that we were all going to focus on jobs, but he was very focused on the fact that we can't have high skill, high wage jobs if we don't have a workforce to support, the globe's #1 place for high skill, high wage jobs. And so you started to immediately see a culture change inside the Department of Education. We weren't talking about test scores anymore. We were talking about what could we be teaching our kids about economic opportunities and career opportunities down the road. Whether somebody wants to be a florist or a chemist, that's really not for any of us to say. But what we needed to do is put a premium on the importance of early learning, because if we don't get early learning right, there is no more learning later on. The importance of colleges and universities and lifelong learning. And Bill, I don't know if everybody noticed or not, but for 3 years in a row now, U.S. News and World Report has said that Florida has the #1 rated colleges and universities in the whole country. And again, that gives voice to when Governor Scott was governor, there were times where we were beating Texas as the #1 state for job creation. But now what's happening under Governor DeSantis is we're top 10 in almost every category now on K-12 and also on higher ed and lifelong learning. In fact, Bill, the legislature just passed a new apprenticeship bill that nobody's heard of yet. But think about this, it encourages businesses to hire those under 18 as apprenticeships, and it gives you some benefits if you do that. That's the kind of thing that this legislature and governor's thinking about. So long answer, but a really good question and a very important pivot that Florida's made.
Yeah, that is actually news to me. I've not heard about this apprentice program, but we down here are all about workforce readiness. I mean, we've got people moving in, here Goldman Sachs is coming to Palm Beach County, and their biggest question is, where are we going to get the workers, the mid-level workers? We're going to bring down these high-paying jobs, and where are we going to get the mid-level workers and analysts without good education? So thanks for that. There's a specific question we have about elections. What, if anything, has the legislature done to change elections and the ability to people to access elections, mail-ins? Has there been any statewide changes proposed by the legislature?
Yeah, so Bill, that's what's interesting about day 59, right? Is when I showed that slide about the wild cards for the end of session, the elections bill, the elections package, as of the start of this call, so big caveat here, I could have egg on my face because I have not paid attention while we've been on this call. The legislature has not yet passed an elections reform package. I actually expect them to. By the time session adjourns tomorrow. I don't know for sure whether they will or not, but it would surprise me if they don't.
And we know that the legislatures by history do that in the last hours of the legislature. If they did, what is on the table? Are we going to see some of the strict changes that we've seen in other states like North Carolina? Or is there going to be something like a Kentucky situation, a little bit anomalous, but maybe not?
Well, Bill, first of all, no one knows what would be in a final package. There's 24 hours left, and that might as well be 10 years in legislative speak. But let me just say this. They are looking at, they're actually looking at having common guidelines throughout the state on, when can people vote. There is a conversation about, needing a photo ID, for, when you're going to vote, things like that. What I would recommend, Bill, is let's assume they're going to pass something for a minute. In many other states, the policy has been set off to the side and the politics have taken over. And what I would really encourage everyone listening this to do is, if in fact they pass it, I would encourage everyone on this call to get a copy of it and actually read it. But before you listen to the media, before you turn on cable TV and listen to your favorite flavor of the news and hear it from somebody else, look, Florida has some of the best elections in the United States. And we have some supervisors. You have one right there. They know what they're doing. And I think what's important is, if they pass what was on the table, it's less restrictive than New York. It's less restrictive than Colorado, which is, where right now they're moving the All-Star game to. It's less restrictive than Delaware, where the president's from. So the bottom line from the Florida Chamber's perspective is, whatever they do, it needs to be fair and it needs to be equitable for all 26 or 27 political parties in Florida. No one should be advantaged or disadvantaged. I don't know what the legislature is going to do here, but stay tuned. I will be surprised if they don't do something, even if it's around the edges on elections, whether they call it reform or tweaking, whatever it might be. But I would go out on a limb and say that whatever they do will not be anywhere near as what some people would call restrictive as what they've done in other states like Colorado, Delaware, New York, New Jersey, places like that.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. Now to the environment. A lot of questions about environment. First of all, we're delighted down here in South Florida to hear about that $500 million for septic to sewers. That's a real thing? We'd also
absolutely
news about the north of the lake cleanup. We've always said for years down here, one of the largest corporations in privately held companies in America, Florida Crystals, is headquartered here in Palm Beach County, and they have had a stellar record of environmental concern. But we have always pointed the finger at what we think is the problem north of the lake. Are there any other legislative priorities that the legislature has done? What about Everglades cleanup in other ways, or anything else that you can share with us? A lot of interest.
Yeah, Everglades cleanup, absolutely. Additional dollars were available there. Additional dollars were put into resiliency as well. So, it's probably more detailed, Bill, than we have time for today, but the Sadowski Affordable Trust Fund was rated again this year, and part of those dollars were used for resiliency funding, under the idea that if we don't make our communities resilient from sea level rise, then there isn't going to be any affordable housing anyways. And so, again, you asked about the difference between this governor and prior governors. This governor has put a huge focus on the Everglades and on the environment. And by the way, so has the Senate and the House. And I think you're seeing record levels of funding as it relates to sea level rise, as it relates to Everglades cleanup, and as it relates to, septic to sewer conversion, as well as north of the lake. It's never fast enough for the Florida Chamber. We wish it could all get done in 1 year. But Bill, we will be putting out, and I'll make sure Donald has it, by late tomorrow, we'll be putting out a comprehensive list of everything that was done. Keep in mind, a lot of this is done in the budget, as opposed to in legislation. And sometimes it takes a while to uncover, what was that 48 million in that part of the budget for exactly? And what was that 112 million for? Sometimes it takes all of us a few days to figure out exactly where that's going to go to. But huge momentum for the environment right now. And we can't have economic development if we don't have a pristine environment. We've always felt that way.
That is so good to hear. None of us a year ago would have dreamed that the budget would actually have had an increase this year of all things. So I'm glad to see some more focus on the environment. Let me ask you a little about insurance. Any changes in the no-fault law, PIP, anything like that? Is that, did that pass?
Not yet, Bill. That's still on the, that's one of those sort of 6 or 7 unresolved issues. I don't know why, but you could set your watch that, tough insurance issues are almost always the very last thing in the last hour of the legislative session. So when they get on insurance issues tomorrow, you'll know they're near the end.
All right. On the remote sales tax, first two things, I'd like your perspective. What on earth took so long? How come the Florida legislature could not muster the strength to bring that remote sales tax bill to pass until this year? And after that perspective, tell us the details. When does it start? Is it now? Has it been signed? Is it when is that going to happen? When are we going to start seeing those funds?
Yeah. So first, it has been signed, Bill, I don't know off the top of my head whether it's a July start or a January start. I'll get that back to Donald, and Donald can maybe update everybody on that. But it has been signed. It's absolutely on its way to being in law. So that's not in jeopardy. In terms of what took so long, that's actually an easy one. Many years ago, let's call it a decade ago, when the Florida Chamber first started advocating for this solution, some groups across America came out and said that this was a tax increase. And so, if you're a Republican, you typically didn't want to be part of a massive tax increase, especially on small businesses. And so we've been arguing for a decade that this was a tax that the Department of Revenue said was already owed. So by definition, it can't be a new tax. But in the court of public opinion, a lot of people were saying, oh, this is a new tax and we don't need new taxes. I think what finally happened is every other state in the country except Florida and Missouri did this. People were not losing their elections over it. People were not getting primary opponents over it. And I think that the timing was finally right, where we had a need, right? The unemployment insurance was about to go up. The business rent tax needed to find a way to be bought down. And every other state in the country that collects sales tax was doing it except us in Missouri. So I appreciate especially, the Senate's leadership on this. You have people like Chip LaMarca down in Broward County that were huge advocates for this. And for the governor to champion it's a big deal too. So, Bill, in politics and policy, timing has to be right. And I think we've been advocating for this for a decade, and it is a head scratcher. What took so long? But, you have Amazon as an example, used to not have brick and mortar in Florida. But once Amazon put distribution centers in brick and mortar in Florida, Amazon was required to collect and pay sales tax as well. Once that happened, that was a big piece of the pie. And so I think more and more legislators realized that local businesses are in fact being hurt badly by this. And it was less about the tax, and it was more about, if you have a clothing store or a small tool shop, people were coming in, trying things on, saying, oh yeah, I like this tool. And the store owner would say, well, are you going to buy it? And go, oh yeah, I'm going to go home and buy it online so I don't have to pay the sales tax. And that's been going on for a decade. And every small business who's in that situation knows exactly what I'm talking about. And you're the reason that the legislature finally did this.
All right. Well, that's interesting. Now we have time for maybe one more substantive question. It's a zinger, and I don't want you to be to give us a whole dissertation on this, but there was COVID liability protection. I know it was the number one focus of the legislature. If you had to summarize it for us business people out there in a sentence or two, what is it that we can do safely, and what is it that we need to think about when it comes to this COVID liability protection that's upcoming?
Yeah, Bill, I'll put it in a nutshell. Just be safe and be smart, right? Like if your business is being cavalier, if you're not doing temperature checks, if you don't have sanitation stations, I mean, we're still wearing, when I get up from where I'm sitting right now and walk to my office, I'll have a mask. I've been fully vaccinated, but I'll still be wearing a mask, right? And just do what the CDC says and be smart. In talking with OSHA, businesses who are being cavalier and saying, oh, no temperature checks, everybody do whatever they want to, assemble in, let's put 15 people in a room that only holds 10. Those are the businesses that I think are still going to be open for lawsuits, and some would argue they should be. I think what we did in Florida here is the vast majority of businesses in Florida did this right. And this legislation was really aimed at, if your business did it right and you made your best efforts to keep people safe, then you shouldn't have to worry about being, part of some suit somewhere. So I think we struck the right balance, Bill, where people still have access to the courts if they find that a business was reckless and careless. But if that business did everything that they could, then that business needed to be protected. And in a nutshell, that's what happened. By the way, CFO Jimmy Patronis is going to speak at our safety conference on May 12th at Disney. And he's actually going to go in detail through the legislation, what happened, what do businesses need to do to be in compliance with it. So we'll be able to talk more about it after that.
Well, we salute the Chamber for returning to that important conference coming up in May. We too are very excited. If you're listening right now and you're still on this call, we're on the money. We're going to be ending this meeting on time. I just want to remind you that our next meeting is live. It's in person, and we are at the Convention Center enjoying breakfast on May 27th. Mark, my final question for you. Will you continue to give us Dr. Parrish at our monthly board meeting so that we can see those that Florida scorecard? And will you return next April and give us?
Yeah, both of those are absolutely yes. We're hoping to add several more economists to the team here, and hopefully we can keep Dr. Parrish for another 10 years. So you can have him as long as we have him.
Thank you, Mark Wilson. Thank you, Donald Burgess. Unless you have a comment, I will say that we have enjoyed this meeting immensely, and I look forward to seeing everybody in person at the Convention Center on May 27th. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.